So this is my story of failure and growth. I once quit a good job to chase a dream that ultimately failed. Um, Owning my own business had always been a dream of mine, and one day I had the opportunity to open up a gourmet food truck. And when I did, I treated it. I didn't treat it like a weekend hobby or a side hustle. And looking back, you could say that I dove straight in with what some people might call a burn the boats mentality, meaning that I didn't create any safety net, uh, no parachutes, nothing to fall back on. So there was no going back on this. I quit my job, I invested my savings, and I went all in. And my dream wasn't just to own a food truck, but I wanted to build a brand name. I wanted to become popular, social media footing that maybe would lead to a second truck and then eventually maybe a restaurant. And so I got it going, I got it started. And every weekend we'd park our food truck on a very busy street on the south side of San Antonio, Military Drive, for those that know. And on Military, there's a bunch of taco trucks at any given time. And I was optimistic. And Saturday nights, they brought in just enough customers to keep me believing that this was going to work. And my wife at the time, she would take the orders, and my mom worked next to me. And I had a little 8-year-old daughter at the time, and she would just spend all her time just hanging around, talking to people. And but the bad part was that it really wasn't growing the way that I hoped. And during the week, the weekends were pretty good, or at least Saturday night. But during the week, customers were pretty scarce. And even on our better weekends, it still wasn't enough. We weren't making enough money to keep up with all the expenses. And I was always wondering, like, well, what could I do different, right? Should I change the menu, location, maybe move somewhere else, maybe even lower my prices? But the one thing that was pretty impossible to ignore is that customers would come over on the weekends for a few seconds and they'd look up at the menu and look over at me and they'd ask, "No tienen tacos?" Meaning you don't have any tacos? And after hearing that enough times, usually I could tell when somebody was going to come up and ask that before they even asked, and I was ready. And as a business, continued to struggle, I started paying for supplies out of my pocket instead of the money that we were making there. Eventually, I was even paying my mom out of my own savings. Near the end, if someone asked me if we had tacos, I'd say something like, well, no, but I can make you some if you want. I mean, I have a whole kitchen right here. But, I would do that, and I didn't feel very good about it. I felt like I was letting go of the original vision that I had for the truck. So I did that for a little bit, and as the financial pressure continued to build, I started looking online. It just wasn't working. I started looking online at what food trucks like mine were going for, custom food trucks. And really, in the beginning, more out of curiosity than anything, I listed my truck for sale online, and I priced it pretty high, and I didn't think anybody would actually bite on it. And but I told myself that if anybody actually made me an offer, I was gonna take it. And eventually, one day, somebody did make me an offer, and I took it. And when the truck finally sold, I felt a little embarrassed. I did. I had quit a very good job. I had convinced my wife at the time to believe in my dream, and now I felt like I had failed as a husband, as a father, as a provider. And but what I didn't really expect was relief. I felt relieved at the time. There was just a constant stress of wondering how I was going to pay the next bill, the next expense, or whether there were going to be enough customers ever. And this pressure and was just heavy and it was weighing on me. And now it was over. And the moment really that stuck with me all these years, even now when I think about it, was when I went and I told my little girl, my little daughter, that I was selling the truck because She looked up at me with a sad little face and she asked me kind of quietly, like, well, what about the family business? And at that moment, I had never thought of it as a family business. In my mind, it was just my dream. It was just something I wanted to do. But hearing her say those words kind of made me realize that she had believed in my dream too. And she was just as invested as much as she could be, as a 8-year-old girl could be. And that feeling of letting her down, it hurt me more than selling the truck ever could. As much as it hurt me to sell the truck, um, letting down my little girl hurt me a lot more. So looking back, I don't see the food truck as wasted time or wasted money, but I do see it as a learning experience. A learning experience that I couldn't have gotten any other way. I learned that hard work isn't always enough. I learned that leaders have to be willing to adapt and change when reality tells them that the plan just isn't working. And well, most importantly, I learned that while a business sometimes fail, and a lot of them do, most of them do, that doesn't mean that the person behind that plan is a failure. You know, sometimes you just pick up and you come up with another plan and you keep going. And if I had to do it all over again, I would probably just start smaller. I would make changes and adapt to the environment sooner instead of trying to hold on to what I initially planned. But would I still take the shot? I would take that shot again. I would. The thing is, I would never want to reach the end of my life wondering what might have happened had I done it, with regret, like I should have done this or I should have done that. But the business failed, but at least I'll never have to wonder, you know what I mean? Or regret never having done it. So that's my story, y'all. I hope you enjoyed it.